You're at 109 right now.
First story I want to talk about happened in about 2004. That's when I got my first car, and the license plate was a personalized license plate. I guess my mom and dad had license plate, personalized license plates, so I followed their precedent. I followed what they had done, and I made sure to get a personalized license plate too. So I put my birth date and then my initials on the car. So my birthday is 10/9 or 10/9, which alludes to October 9th. And then I put my initials LAW, Larry Alfred Wiggs, and then the number 2 because I'm the second. My dad is the first or senior and I'm junior. That was the first time I thought of 10/9 in any sort of creative or quirky sense. And I put that on my license plate. 10/9, Law 2. First time. The year was 2007 and I didn't have a job in Los Angeles. So I found a job in South Korea teaching English. And I had to move. I had to uproot myself and fly away. I flew to South Korea not knowing a lot about the culture, about the country. Um, I take that back. I knew a lot about South Korea because I had studied their martial art, Taekwondo, when I was a kid. And I have a black belt in their martial art. So I've been around Koreans all my life. I've eaten Korean food all my life. I was ready for the experience of living in Korea. Um, when I got to Korea, it was in March. And then I had a 1-year contract. So by the time October rolled around, I was excited about my birthday because it's just a birthday, right? Hey, I'm going to celebrate my birthday. What I did not know was that in South Korea, they have a holiday, the Korean language holiday, or the Hangul alphabet proclamation date. You see, the language was created by a king, King Sejong, many years ago, and they celebrate the creation of the language on October 9th, 10/9, my birthday. So I was ready to celebrate my birthday when I was smacked in the face with the reality that, hey, nobody cares about your birthday. Everybody in Korea is celebrating the Korean proclamation date. So I still got the day off because it's a national holiday, which was a beautiful coincidence to live in a country where your birthday is a national holiday. So you don't have to work hard. You don't have to work on the day of your birthday. It's your birthday. Let's see. Between 2007 and 2015, well, I can't recall any 10/9 moments happening between '07 and 2015. I'm sure something happened, but I just couldn't think of it. But in 2015, something about those numbers just started to resonate with me. They grabbed my attention, okay? So I was in Japan. I had gone to the ramen restaurant called Ichiran Ramen, famous, world famous ramen. You can even buy the ramen here in Los Angeles. Ichiran, delicious stuff. I went into the ramen restaurant for the first time. They have ushers there. And so kind of instead of waiters, they have ushers. So he ushered me in. I had already placed my order on a little machine on the outside. You bring your tickets. The usher brings you in and says, come this way and sit down. So he seated me at seat number 10. All right. Now in Japanese, 10 is a cross. All right. So I saw the cross atop my seat, atop my booth. When he seated me there, I looked up and I saw the cross. I don't know if I knew that the cross was 10 at the time. I don't know, but I knew I was seated in number 10. Maybe I did a quick look or something. I don't know. I don't know how I did this. But I looked up and I saw, I guess I recognized it was 10. And then I looked to the right and you see the Japanese write their numbers from right to left. Unlike English speakers and writers and whatever, we write from left to right. So the Japanese had written their numbers in ascending order. Their numbers got bigger from right to left. So as I looked to my right, it was the number 9. And I was like, how did he choose? How did he know to seat me here? It was just the perfect seat for me. It was 10. I could look up and see 9, 10, 9. But it was in Japanese, and I don't know how I knew Japanese at that point. Did I use Google? Did I translate? I don't know. Was I studying the Japanese language? Probably. But I was seated at 10, 9. One of the reasons why that really stuck out to me was because I was alone, and because the weekend that I traveled to Japan, it was the weekend before my birthday. So it was actually around October 6th, just 3 days before my birthday. And there I was being seated at booth number 10, right next to 9, 10, 9. So I was thinking like, wow, that's my birthday. On that same trip to Japan, when I was leaving Japan, I rode the ferry. And so the ferry boat, I went to the ferry terminal to board the boat. I got my ticket. And while I was waiting for the ferry to depart, I looked at my ticket because I hadn't really studied it before. I just knew I had a ticket. I looked at it and I noticed that the ferry number was 109 or 109. It said JF 109 on my ticket. Japan Ferry 109. So, same trip. This is the third story about the same trip to Japan. It was my birthday weekend. 3 days before my birthday, I went to Japan and I spent 3 days there in Japan. So I went to the ramen restaurant. He seated me at 10-9. I went through the ferry. Japan ferry was number 109. And then now I'm back in South Korea. And I had to board the train to go back to my home. And I bought my ticket and my seat assignment was in row 10. Now I didn't check, I didn't scrutinize, I didn't peruse the ticket. I just took the ticket and I went to the train. And when I boarded the train, I noticed that the train was pretty empty. And I looked at the ticket and I was like, what row am I in? And I said, oh, look, I'm in row 10. And as I was sitting down, again, I saw 10 and I saw 9. And now this is like 2 days or 1 day before my birthday, and I'm alone on this train. It's empty, and I was wondering to myself, of all the seats on the train was basically empty. Why did she choose row 10 for me? So this was all in the same weekend that all three of these stories, the two that I told before, that this occurred. So it just kept hitting me like 10-9, 10-9, 10-9, your birthday, your birthday, your birthday. I was all alone. I took pictures as evidence of what happened, but it was a bizarre sequence of events. But 10-9 definitely made an impression on me in 2015, right before my birthday. In 2017, I went to Mexico City. My intention while I was in Mexico City was, of course, to go to Frida Kahlo's The Blue House. and I made my way to the Blue House. Well, no, before getting there, I woke up, got ready to go out, and I called an Uber to pick me up. I was staying at an Airbnb with a family, right? The Uber driver picked me up and drove me to the Frida Kahlo Blue House. And then as I arrived, I was just about to get out of the car when I noticed the radio station that the driver was listening to from that home, from my Airbnb home to the Blue House. It was radio station 100.9. And so when I saw that, I kind of thought like, hey, it may not be 109, but it's still 10 and 9. Look at those numbers, 1009, it's still 10 and 9. So that's a reference to an allusion to my birthday. So I thought that was interesting. I think a few years later, I learned that that's just a really popular radio station in Mexico. So it was like, whatever. So next, I was in Peru. The year still, it was 2017. And I went to Machu Picchu that year. And I hiked from the base of Machu Picchu City. I hiked all the way up to the entrance gate at Machu Picchu. And then it took me about an hour. And then from there, I hiked all the way up to the summit of this Montaña Machu Picchu. I got to the summit. When I got to the summit of the mountain, it took about 2 hours, and I started around 8 in the morning. So by the time I got to the top, it was around 10 a.m. Well, I didn't plan it that way. It just so happened that's how it played out. Now, I got to the top, I looked around, everything was beautiful. I snapped some photos. I took photos, selfies of myself, as memories of my journey. And then I stopped and I wondered, okay, now what are you supposed to do after you've hiked all the way up to the top? Are you supposed to sit, meditate, eat lunch? How long do you have to stay up here? Because there are other people arriving, and it can get crowded up there. So I was like, what am I supposed to do? So after I got my pictures and everything, then I checked my cell phone clock to see what time it was, and it was 10:08 a.m. And I was like, whoa, at 10:08 a.m., that's just 1 minute from my numbers, 10:09 a.m. So I felt like the Inca spirits were telling me, you know what? It was in that moment that I was atop Machu Picchu that it kind of came together. It was like the spirits have been communicating with you all along through these numbers. Because once I was atop Machu Picchu, I was waiting to feel a spiritual connection of some kind. And when I saw my cell phone and I saw that I was 1 minute away from 10:09, then I rationalized that, 10:09 is my spiritual calling. And I said, well, I've completed the journey up until the summit. 10:09 means now you can go down. So I was like, okay. At 10:09, I started to make my descent. That was in Peru, atop Machu Picchu, 2017. All right, so I was in Cuba in 2017, and I was reading this book, Ernesto Che Guevara de la Serna, Notas de Viaje, Diario en Motocicleta. All right. I just opened the book and I began reading it when I read a sentence that caught my attention. The sentence basically was telling of Che Guevara's life. It was recounting his life. And then, where is that sentence? Where is it? I think it was the English version that I had. I don't know. Maybe it was here. Well, it was this book. I know it was the English version because it couldn't have been the Spanish version, right? Anyhow, so I was reading this book. I have another copy of the book over here. Yeah, here it is. All right, so this is the copy I bought in Cuba. It has the Cuban price tag up here in CUC, Cuban convertible, you know, and it's an English version right there. This is the Spanish version I later bought right here in America, but this one here. So as I was reading it, I read this line. It said here, it said Che Guevara. No, it says here, it says Che Guevara. He was wounded and captured by U.S. trained and run Bolivian counterinsurgency troops on October 8th, 1967. The following day, he was murdered and his body hidden. So as I was reading this, I was in Cuba and I was like, wait a minute, what's happening here? It said that he was captured on October 8th. Okay, that's 10/8. And then the following day, he was murdered and his body hidden. Well, wait a minute, the following day is 10/9. So there I was reading this book in Cuba, the country where this man right here led the Cuban Revolution alongside Fidel Castro and many others, but he died. I learned that he died on 10/9, and that was just like, that was a huge coincidence. To be in Cuba, to be in the country where he led the revolution, and then to learn that he died on 10/9, that was like crazy, scary, spooky. In 2017, I traveled to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, but it was, and then I went back to Ethiopia because it was just such a profound experience. I wanted to just keep going back to Ethiopia. One of my last trips to Ethiopia occurred in 2018, and I was there. I was at the museum at Addis Ababa University, and I was on the second floor. So I was at the museum, and I had to take a bathroom break. So I walked to the bathroom, and on my way to the bathroom, I noticed the door that I was passing. And as I looked at the door, I noticed that someone had written 10 and 9 on that door. And I was like, hold up. I keep finding 109. I keep having these moments, these intense moments, these coincidences, these curious moments when I see 109, and here I am in Ethiopia once again. And I was like, who wrote 109 there? I just couldn't understand it. And I took a picture of it for evidence, like, yo, I saw 109. And it wasn't supposed to be there because we were on the second floor. And if you're on the second floor, then door numbers are usually 201, 202, 203, etc. But someone had written 10 and 9 on that door. And I was like, I don't know why that's there. Ethiopia, that was 2018. Also in 2018, I traveled to Madrid, Spain. And when I was in Madrid, Spain, I was on Instagram. I was, snapping photos, things that were curious, and posting them to Instagram as I do. Well, during that trip, during my first few days, first day or two, I think it was my first day. Yeah, I went to sleep, woke up the next morning. I think it was my first day, or the first night carried over into the first day in Madrid, Spain. I had, so it was the second day. I arrived at night, went to sleep, I woke up. So it was my second official day in, is that second official day? It was my first official day in in Madrid. It was the first official day in Madrid. I took a photo and uploaded it to Instagram, and I had taken my 1090th photo to Instagram. 1090, 1090th, okay? And I thought that was a coincidence. Like, oh, wow, look, that's my number, 1090. That's cool. Within minutes of having taken that photo, I exited my hotel room. I went outside. I was going to go, walk around the city or do whatever I was going to do. I walk outside the hotel. I turn the corner. I walk down to the corner. I turn, make a right, and immediately I'm struck by the image of this car parked that has license plate number 1090. And I had just uploaded my 1090th picture to Instagram, and there was a car with the license plate 1090, Madrid, Spain, 2018. In 2017, December of 2017, I took a trip to Sri Lanka, and I left Saudi Arabia to go to Sri Lanka. I was living and working in Saudi Arabia. So I took my trip to Sri Lanka, and then on my way back from my trip to Sri Lanka, when I got back to, to Saudi Arabia, I was thinking about the fact that I had seen 109 in so many different places, but in Sri Lanka, I hadn't seen it. There was no license plate. There were no one had written 109 on doors or anywhere. And so it was just like, maybe I imagined everything. Maybe 109, these were just coincidences. And so I just kind of brushed it off like, yeah, I was fixated with those numbers and what have you. And so I just let it pass. Like it's out. It's away from me. Do you know I was exiting the airport. I had my luggage and I was standing in line waiting for a taxi. And as I was waiting for the taxi, well, the people in front of me got attacked. You know how the taxis match with the people because you stand in line for a taxi and someone's before you. Well, then they get the first taxi, and then you're next in line. So the next taxi is yours. So I was waiting for the next taxi. Do you know the next taxi that pulled up, the license plate read 109 something? And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Here it is again. So I'm not free. I'm not free from 109. Here it is once again. True story. On my trip to Spain in 2018, I visited Cordoba. Cordoba, the city of Cordoba. When I went to Cordoba, I rode the train from Granada to Cordoba and back. But when I was on my way to Cordoba, when I arrived, I got off of the train. I got off the train and I stepped out onto the platform, the train platform, and I noticed the sign immediately outside the door. As soon as I stepped off the train, the sign read 3439. And I looked at that for a second and I looked and I thought to myself, 3 plus 4 plus 3 equals 10. And then the number 9 was just below it. I was like, wow, here's 10-9 again. I'm stepping off the train exactly where I stepped off. I'm at basically 10-9. It wasn't 10-9 specifically, but it was close enough. So on my trip to Spain in 2018, I visited Granada, Cordoba, Malaga, and Ronda. Those 4 cities. And what I did not know at the time is that the history of Spain included, of course, the Moorish conquest. Now, I learned about the Moorish conquest before I went to Spain. But what I did not know was that in the year 1090, those 4 cities that I mentioned, and plus 2 more, okay, they had all been conquered by the Muslims, by the Moors, by the Almoravids. And I thought to myself, wow, how did I get to those? How did I choose those 4 cities? Well, interestingly enough, I wanted to go to Cordoba because of the Moorish history that I learned about. So I wanted to see that. I wanted to go to Granada because of the Moorish history and because of the Alhambra. I wanted to go and see that. But Malaga was a city that I wanted to visit because I heard there are nice beaches there. And then Ronda was a city that I had heard about because it's old, it's beautiful, and all this other type of stuff. I wanted to go to Cordoba and I wanted to go to Granada, and Malaga and Ronda were desires, but I wasn't going to put that much effort into going to see them. But with the time that I had in Spain, one day I had rented a car and I decided I would drive to Malaga. Well, I had input the wrong GPS destination and I ended up in Ronda. And I thought, okay, I'll just make the most of it because I wanted to see Ronda anyway. So I went to Ronda when I actually had the intention of going to the beaches of Malaga that day. Well, during my trip to Spain, I took a bus ride and the bus ride actually stopped in Malaga, which is how I got to at least be in Malaga, and how I got Cordoba, Granada, Ronda, and Malaga kind of checked off of the list. But I kind of thought about it like, these were 4 of the 6 cities that were conquered by the Moors in the year 1090. And if I had made my way to Malaga originally, I would have only visited 3 of those cities. But because of my mistake in GPS, I got to visit 4 of those cities. And plus that bus ride that I took, I ended up in Malaga anyway. So it was like, I don't know, I feel like I was spiritually led to these places because of the 10:9 reference, the year 1090, but also because I was going to visit Malaga on bus. So it was kind of like I was forced to go to Ronda to see more of the city, kind of a thing. I don't know. I was in Medellin, Colombia in 2018, 2019. I saw the new year come in. I was there for New Year's Day, 2008, 2019. I think it was 2018, but I was in an Airbnb downtown Medellin. I went to sleep, and then for some strange reason, I didn't hear any loud noises or whatever, but I woke up. And when I woke up, I checked my watch on my cell phone. It was 1:09 a.m. exactly when I checked the phone. Coincidence, spiritual calling. It is what it is. All of that. It's true. It happened. Here I am again, Mr. 109, with more stories to bore you. To bore you. Hopefully, I'm not boring you. Let's see what we got here. Mm. Fixed it. All right, so I started this yesterday, Monday. I guess I started yesterday, and then I'm continuing today. I've got so many of these moments, these 10:9 moments. So I was reading moments before I press record on this video. I was reading about a scientist, Cifre. His last name, Siffre. He went 440 feet into the earth, underground, and there was no sunlight. He was all alone, and he stayed for over 100 and some odd days. And what happened is he became disoriented. He was, from what I just read, it said something about he was studying the effects of time, as if like time is outside of the human body, is outside, it's our experience. Our bodies have circadian rhythms that are linked with with sunlight. So we see the sun and we know to get up, and then we know when it's nighttime to go to sleep. Well, when he was underground, there was no sunlight, and there was no way for him to know what time to get up or get out, because he didn't have a clock, he didn't have televisions, he didn't have radios, he didn't have anything to occupy his mind. And so, or to keep his mind in tune with the changes that were happening above ground. And so, you know, things happened to him. His brain began to deteriorate, and his things were, he couldn't, what did they say? They said that mid-sentence he would forget a word, and his whole sense of time was, thrown off, of course, because he wasn't keeping up with time. And so this whole 10-9 experience of mine, seeing 10-9, focusing on 10-9, talking about it, makes me feel like that scientist. I'm delving way deep into this 10-9 experience, so much so that it's detrimental. It could be detrimental to my cognition. I don't think so, because, well, I mean, yeah, talk with Big Mike, and he's like, man, you're gonna end up, you keep talking about this 10-9, you're gonna end up in a padded room and stuff. And I'm just like, this stuff is real, man. This what has happened to me is real, and I'm just telling my story. So I can't explain it. And I always fall back on the quote by Einstein. Einstein said, life is a mystery. And I'm just sharing a mystery of mine. Um, So I have no conclusion about this. All I'm doing is just saying these are things that I noticed, but for them to have happened so frequently, for them to have happened at all, they really call my attention to those numbers. I mean, it's just, I don't know. Of course, I knew before I knew what 109 meant to me. All I saw in those moments when I encountered 109 was, I knew that it was something strange. It was something that I needed to pay attention to. And that's why I documented all of these moments, and I collected photos and just evidence. Like, I saw it here, I saw it there. It was bizarre. And collecting all of the evidence and so forth and so on has just been important, important to the telling of the story. But also, um, yeah, it's just important. It's just been necessary. It's just been um, a part of the journey. But for what has happened, and for what has happened when I look back on those events, that's when the reality sets, that it's like, wow, this is completely bizarre. This is not just a coincidence. This is not just me fixating on these numbers. Something really is happening, which is exciting. That's why I talk about it and share it. So, all right, let me get back into these stories then. So hopefully I'll get to the exciting part. Um, all right. So picture it, 2018. I'm right here in Los Angeles. In 2018, I had already been to Ethiopia. I went to Ethiopia in 2017. And by 2018, The importance of Ethiopia to all Black people weighed heavy on me. I understood more about life in, or rather from the perspective of Ethiopia, from the perspective of, you know, humanity comes from Ethiopia. Um, what all of the scholars, the Ivy League scholars, what all they talk about about Ethiopia, and what all they know, I had a little piece, a glimpse of what they know. I saw it. I was there. I touched the rock with my feet, with my hands. I ate the food. Ethiopia was no longer a hidden treasure. It was a treasure that I had touched, I had seen. So, and it's very important because the idea that Ethiopia is the only African nation that has gone unconquered by a colonizer, by a colonizing a country. You know, Italy tried to colonize Ethiopia, tried to subdue her, and Ethiopia just tossed Italy off of her like it was nothing. That is tremendously, that is a beacon of hope for all Black people, because in America and around the world, we look at these colonizers as if they are better, superior, when the reality is that Africa and Africans are superior. But you don't really understand it until you see the history. So that's what I'm talking about. I learned the history, I saw it firsthand, and it's changed my perspective on life. And so there I was after my travels to Ethiopia, back in Los Angeles, and all I ever wanted to do is hang out at Little Ethiopia. I wanted to be back in Ethiopia. So I'm in Los Angeles and I'm at Little Ethiopia, a block, a stretch, one stretch, a block long stretch of restaurants and markets for East Africans, East African families, you know, refugees or what have you. And that's where I wanted to be. So to contrast, to give you some idea, before I traveled to Ethiopia, I had no knowledge of Ethiopia the way that I do today. And when I was in high school, specifically, I used to drive straight through Little Ethiopia en route to a Korean Taekwondo martial arts school on Wilshire Boulevard, because that's where I thought I needed to be. Today, I'm more aware of history. I'm more aware of Ethiopia. So now I just like, I want to go to Little Ethiopia. I haven't, honestly, for transparency purposes, I haven't been to Little Ethiopia in several months, in quite a while. But I enjoy going to Little Ethiopia and just catching a vibe. So, all right. So the story goes, the year is 2018. I'm back in Los Angeles after my travels to Ethiopia, not Little Ethiopia, but Ethiopia. And so now I'm back in LA, and I'm like, I learned so much about Ethiopia. I want to continue learning about Ethiopia. So I said, I'm going to join the Ethiopian language classes at Little Ethiopia. The language Ethiopia's one of Ethiopia's language is called Amharic. And so I went to Little Ethiopia to learn Amharic. Now here's the story, right? I'm driving to the class on a Saturday. I'm running late, and I get to an intersection and I have a choice to make. There's a bus to my right, and you're supposed to yield to the bus and let the bus go ahead of you. But again, I was late for the class, and I thought, man, I should just keep going, forget about the bus, just try to beat the bus to the intersection or through the intersection. I guess the light turned. I was waiting at the intersection, right? And it was either wait for the bus, yield for the bus, or take off and try to get in front of the bus. So when the light turned green, I decided wait for the bus. That's the right thing to do. So as I waited for the bus pulled forward and then merged into my lane. And then I could clearly see the license plate of the bus, and it read 109 and some other numbers. And in that moment, when I saw 109 like that, I thought to myself, I rationalized, hey, you did the right thing. You were supposed to wait for that bus. Even though you're rushing to get to this class, you were patient in this moment and you allowed the bus to, you yielded for the bus and you were rewarded with a sight of 109 on that bus. That's how I rationalized this. And so I thought to myself, dang, that's my number. 109 is special and unique to me. And I just imagined it was a good omen and it was positive. I put a positive spin on it. Well, when the bus pulled off and when I followed the bus and then I finally made it to the class, when I got to the class, I realized that there was no reason for me to have rushed in the first place. Because when I got to the class, I thought there would be like maybe 10 students and we were all going to be studying the language and that I would be ashamed for arriving late and that I might slow the rest of the class down because I'm not picking up things that they picked up, faster because they were there earlier than I was, you know? But there was none of that because when I arrived, there was only one other student there. And he was a great gentleman, nice man. And he seemed to have just as much of a fascination with Ethiopia that I did and an appreciation for Ethiopia the same way I did. But he was a black man. He is a black man, just like me. So I was just taken aback by this moment. Like, you know, if it's for you, if it's meant for you, then it will be. You don't have to rush it, okay? It will be there for you, kind of a thing. And I thought about that like, wow, I didn't need to rush because once I arrived, they were welcoming. Hey, welcome. We're glad that you came. Sit down. And I was just like, oh, I thought you guys were going to be upset with me for showing up late. But that wasn't the case at all. And 10-9 was on the back of that bus, and 10-9 informed me, said, just relax, relax. Everything is in correct order. So that was that 10-9 story there. All right. So I told you about Los Angeles in 2018, the bus. All right, next. The year is 2018, but this time I'm in the Middle East. I'm in the Middle Eastern country called Bahrain. I'm in the capital city called Manama. It's a weekend. Okay, so I lived in Saudi Arabia. I lived and worked in Saudi Arabia between 2016 and 2018. On weekends, we would leave, myself and my colleagues, we would leave Saudi Arabia and go to Bahrain. Bahrain is where you can buy alcohol, you can talk to women, you can watch movies, you can go to clubs and dance. Everything that you come to expect to be, a part of life and just let your hair down, so to speak, as it were. Those are the things that we came to embrace in Bahrain because we could not do them in Saudi Arabia. So every weekend we're over in Bahrain, meeting women, drinking alcohol, listening to music, whatever, just enjoying ourselves, right? Now, I would get a hotel room in Bahrain where all of my colleagues, we would all reconvene over in Bahrain, get hotel rooms, 2-night stays, right? Stay there over the weekend and then we get back to work, you know. So I go to this hotel that I've stayed in before. It's kind of it's on the low end, right? It's more like a motel, really. So I'm staying at this motel. I stayed there before, but on this day, I get, well, I was going to say I get a different room than I usually get, but let me stress that I never got the same room. What I did is I would always get a different room just because it was about availability. It had nothing to do with my preference. It was just, I'll take whatever room as long as it's a cheap room and it's near the party scene, basically. So I go in and I get my room key and I go up to the room that I've been assigned to. I open the door and then I look in the room and I notice there's a television that has a satellite box above it, for TV reception, international channels and whatnot. The satellite box on top of the television is not on, mind you. This satellite box is set to station or frequency number 109. I had never stayed in that room before, and my colleagues who stayed in the same motel, in their rooms, they didn't have the same frequency set on that box. But I got the room that had the frequency or had the satellite box with 109 on it. And so that was bizarre as you can imagine. When I went in there and I saw that, I thought to myself that maybe the CIA or the FBI knew where I was at all times and that it was kind of a signal to say, hey, we know where you are. You can't hide from your big brother, the United States, sort of a thing. Because I knew Black Panthers. I worked with the Black Panther Party with the son of a famous Black Panther Party member, and so I thought, man, could they be keeping tabs on us like COINTELPRO? Is that what this is? So your mind wanders. But that's what happened in Bahrain. The TV had 109 on it. All right. All right. In 2019, I went to Vietnam for the first time. Oh, before I start that story, the next story. Oh, and I've already told two stories, and the date has already changed. It's now April 1st. It's April 1st. All right. So this is a story about my first trip to Vietnam, my first and only trip to Vietnam so far. So let's try to make this one short. I was in Cambodia. I was in Cambodia, and then I boarded a plane that would take me from Cambodia to Vietnam. On that plane, my seat assignment was in row 9, which I thought was bizarre. Again, I thought, wow, here I am getting seat assignment number 9. It's with me, it's either 10 or 9. Whoa, what's going on? Here it is again, right? So I had seat assignment number 9. Then from Cambodia, I fly to Vietnam. I get to Vietnam. I have to go through customs as everyone has to, right? The only way for an American, for someone to get through that customs is to have a Vietnamese representative to help you with the paperwork, because when you come through customs, you deal with someone in the military, and they're basically like, look, if you didn't fill out your paperwork correctly, you're not getting into our country. You're getting back on that plane and getting out of here. So I had already made arrangements to have someone help me to help process me through customs. So I got off the plane, I got to customs. My liaison was there and he said, "Give me your passport and I'll process you so you can enter Vietnam. Have a seat and wait for me." I handed over my documents. He talked with the customs official. He came back to me and he said, "Okay, Mr. Wiggs, Larry, here's all your paperwork. Here's your visa. You've been granted entry into Vietnam." I said, "Great, thanks." He said, "Now your driver is waiting for you." See, all of this was prearranged by my liaison, the company. I paid them, hey, have someone there to meet me, to process me, and to make sure everything runs smoothly so I can get into Vietnam. He tells me your driver is waiting for you. He tells me your driver is waiting for you at gate number 10. So there I was in Vietnam for the first time ever. I flew to Vietnam in a seat in row 9. And then I got to Vietnam and I was told that my driver was waiting for me at gate 10. 10-9, y'all. That's what it is with me. I'm gonna try to hurry up and just tell these stories, but I just like the details. My goodness. I just wanna just keep rambling. But okay. In 2019, I was at the country called Oman. You know, if you know it, you know it. Oman. I was there to work. I was hired as a university professor, English language professor. I arrived in Oman. They put me up in a hotel the first night. I arrived at night. So that night I slept in a hotel upon arrival. The following day, I was instructed to meet my driver and that my driver would take me to the headquarters of the company that I was working for, where I would sign my work contract. Thereafter, I would get another driver to drive me to my work site where I would live. All right. So the following morning after my arrival in Oman, I went to sleep at the hotel. The next morning, my driver met me at the hotel. He drove me to the headquarters where I was going to walk in and sign my paperwork, sign my work contract. As I was walking into the headquarters, the main office, I noticed a car parked outside of the headquarters, the home office. That car's license plate read 10914. Now, in that moment, I'll tell you, I felt like, oh man, here I am chasing another dollar in a foreign land, so far away from home, from my family. Like, what am I doing? What has my life become? I'm just chasing money all over the world. But when I saw that license plate, I thought to myself the same thing that I thought when I was in Los Angeles and I saw 109 on that bus on my way to Little Ethiopia. I thought, man, that car and that license plate, that's a good omen. That means that everything's in its rightful place, in its rightful order. Don't worry, don't stress. That's a good omen. Go sign that work contract and then just live your life. Just keep going. And that's what I did. That was Oman. That was the first thing that happened to me in Oman in 2019. That was the first. All right. 2019 in Oman. The next thing that happened in Oman is the date was March 31st, right here in Los Angeles. It was April 1st, the following day, because Oman is 11 hours ahead of Oman. It was April 1st in Oman. On March 31st in Los Angeles, rapper Nipsey Hussle was murdered. He was shot down. Hours later, I woke up in Oman, and as soon as I woke up, I looked at my Instagram feed. I looked at my cell phone, and I kept seeing Nipsey Hussle's pictures on my Instagram page, and I thought, what's going on? And then I saw that a friend of mine wrote prayers up for Nipsey. He was a really good dude. So the past tense, he was a good dude. Prayers up. All of this made me say, oh my God, something terrible happened to Nipsey. Then I started Googling, and then I discovered, oh, Nipsey's been shot. He died from his wounds. So I was a wreck after getting that news, because the year was 2019, and a year prior in 2018, I had bought Nipsey Hussle's Victory Lap record. I bought his CD, and I had become like a really big Nipsey Hussle fan. Like, his music was more polished than it had ever been before, and his music was safer now for me to consume it, because his raw material, Bullets Ain't Got No Name, Slauson Boy, this, and ooh, that was just too raw, you know. I liked it. I liked the Crenshaw, LP, but it was too raw for me. It was gang, it was gang culture, and I'm not, that's not me. But by 2018, he was so polished, and it was just such a power. His presence was so powerful. I was supporting Nipsey. So when a year later in 2019, hearing that he had been murdered, I was devastated, because I was right there with him, like riding with him, like, go Nipsey, go Nipsey, go. In fact, 1 week prior to him being murdered, I was reading the article about him in Forbes magazine. And I was just like, go, Nipsey, go. And then a week later, he's murdered. And I'm like, oh no, this is terrible. This is tragic. All right. But what happened to me in Oman with regard to Nipsey is, I woke up to the news of Nipsey Hussle's demise. I got dressed, took a shower. I drove to work. As I'm driving to work in the desert of Oman, no cars are on the road except my car and this one truck. And this truck had the nerve to cut me off. I noticed that that truck's license plate read 1090. And I was like, oh my gosh, here's 109 again. And first, I was saddened by Nipsey's murder. Then I was angry that this man had cut me off. But when I saw 109, all of those emotions were washed away. And I was like, relax. You're in God's hands. Everything is good. That's your number. 109 is your sign. It's a good omen. Relax. So I cooled down. I relaxed. But what happened the following week, like, confirmed for me something that I had an inclination when, after hearing about Nipsey's death, and then that car having cut me off, there was a moment there where I thought to myself, dang, if Nipsey could be taken out of this world, I could have lost my life. That car could have run me off the road. I could be dead too. And so it made me just feel like with a great gratitude, and just to say, oh my God, be thankful to God for every moment. And when I saw 109 and all of those emotions were washed away, I felt that I had been touched by God. And I was just like, Nipsey and 109, Nipsey and 109. Like, it was just clear. 109 was my number, and 109 had a positive, interpretation. I put a positive interpretation on 109, and now I'm seeing 109 related to Nipsey, and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. And then I felt the presence of God, so I was like, 109 and Nipsey, they go together. But as I said, it was 1 week later. Let me go back, because when I'm thinking in that moment, when I was thinking of 109 and Nipsey, then I also thought about Ethiopia and Eritrea, and I thought about Nipsey's heritage, his bloodline leading all the way back to the city that I had been to, Aksum, and the Aksumite Empire under the Queen of Sheba, biblical references. And I'm like, Nipsey was Jesus. That was clear to me. That day that we lost Nipsey, and okay, I know it's a crazy idea, it's a bizarre idea, but that's what I was thinking. I was like, whoa, man, how come I never met this guy, but his death has impacted me so much? And then here I am, I see my numbers the same day, like within an hour of having learned of his death to driving to work, I see my numbers. I'm like, 109 and Nipsey go together. And then 1 week later, I walk outside of my home. I'm going to work again. Of course, I'm a wreck because the news of Nipsey Hussle's murder just messed me up for the whole week. So I was trying to come out of it, come out of the haze, come out of the sadness, this sort of stupor I was in. And 1 week later, that day, I walked outside of my home, and I looked into the sky, and I saw a cross in the sky. And was, I knew that cross could not have been made by airplanes because they were too low to the ground. They were too clear, because if airplanes had just made those lines, they would have had to have flown low to the ground, and they would have had to have flown just before I walked outside of my home. And I knew no airplanes fly at that altitude. Excuse me. And I knew, number two, it would have been too much of a coincidence for one airplane to fly in one fashion and then the other to fly perpendicularly to that. And for that to have happened within 2 or 3 minutes of me, exiting my house, or 2 to 3 minutes just before me exiting the house. And I was certain that no airplanes had created those lines because I lived there for like 6 or 7 months. So this was like the second month that I lived there that I had never seen airplanes fly at that altitude where those lines were. And I was like, that's a sign from God. So those three things stuck out in my mind. It was Nipsey Hussle, it was 109, and then it was that cross, which I'll never forget. And that all happened in Oman within 1 week of Nipsey's passing. The day Nipsey passed, I was thinking about Nipsey and I saw 109. 1 week later, I saw a cross in the sky. Now, to bring that story full circle, check this out. When I came back to Los Angeles in 2019, around August, late July, August, I came back and I was driving down Crenshaw Boulevard, and I saw three things on Crenshaw Boulevard right next to each other. I saw the number 109, I saw a cross, and I saw a Nipsey Hussle mural. Doop, doop, doop. Three things, just like that. And I was like, I was in the desert. I was 8,000 miles away when I learned of Nipsey's demise. I saw the number 109 and I saw a cross in the sky. And here I am right back in Los Angeles at the corner of Crenshaw and 60th Street. And I see those exact three things. And I'm not talking you have to look for them either. I'm talking it's right there, there, and there. I was like, man, 10-9 has got me. I'm out there with these ideas, but at the same time, it seems like it's supposed to be that way. Like these really are signs. Like, listen, you saw what you saw in the desert, but you saw that as a prelude, as a preview of what you were going to see when you come back to Los Angeles. So know that 109 is real, is strong, is powerful. It's deep, y'all. All I can say is deep.
For the last 2 years, I've been thinking about the Black Madonna. In some ways, the Madonna Project was born because I was in Basel, kind of considering fully what might happen if I were to do an exhibition there. And I knew that there was a really important, very famous Black Madonna in the far north of Switzerland that lots of different kinds of people would go to and pay homage to. I was curious about that Madonna in relationship to my knowledge of the Black Madonna, which came through a kind of Black liberation theology group in Detroit called the Shrine of the Black Madonna. So I quickly kind of made this parallel between the kind of Catholic icon and this Black revolutionary, kind of radical Black religious group.
The basic reason or symptom or proof for the racism of the Christian church is the simple fact that white people have pretended for so long that Jesus was white, and that they've had the necessity to interpret Jesus as being white, when essentially white Christianity is racially is historically false and theologically absurd, and practically, in terms of its effect on black people, it's a debasing institution that enslaves black people. I think we have to understand, though, that we're not making moral judgments here. Any institution that exists in any society exists to serve the interests of the people who set it up. And Christianity began as a black man's religion. It's an African religion. We have to remember that Israel went into Egypt with 70 people, and after approximately 750 years came out with over 2 million people, and hordes of other slaves who came out and became also part of the emerging new nation of Israel. So Israel, the biblical Israel, was a black nation, an African nation that came out of Africa and kept constant ties with Africa. And so we have to remember then that Jesus was a black Messiah, not a white Messiah, and he comes out of the whole historical background of Africa, of African traditions, of African history, of African culture, the concept of communalism, the concept of a chosen people, the concept of kingdom of God on earth. All these things were out of African tradition, not out of the white man's tradition. And Jesus was essentially a revolutionary Messiah who was trying to lead a black people in a revolt, in a struggle and conflict with a white Gentile oppressor. So the whole church has to be viewed from the point of view of the white oppressor. The white oppressor has one kind of Christianity, has one kind of church. The black church has to become independent and go back to the historic African roots of Christianity, because the slave church that the white man set up for black people tends to continue the enslavement of black people. So the black church has to become again a revolutionary instrument in the hands of black people, controlled by black people, fighting as Jesus fought for the liberation of black people against white Gentile oppression.
October 9th, that's where it starts.
You see, it's the same old thing.